Have you ever been so desperate you'd accept a miracle from a stranger? No questions asked. What if that miracle had a hidden cost, a price that threatened to turn you into a monster? This is a story about a gift that became a curse, a cure that was worse than the disease, and a night that changed everything. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is a journey into the darkest corners of hope and the terrifying nature of what we're willing to become to be whole again. My name is Leo. For the last 6 years, my world had been confined to the 4 walls of my bedroom in a rundown part of Detroit. A rare neuromuscular disease dormant since birth had woken up when I was 13. It started with fatigue, then muscle spasms, then a searing pain that felt like my bones were dissolving. By 16, I needed walkers. Now, at 22, a wheelchair was my permanent shadow. My only escape was the glowing screen of my second-hand laptop, where I taught myself to code. It was my one connection to a world I couldn't walk in, my single hope of earning enough to maybe, just maybe, find some experimental treatment. My dad, Frank, was another story. Since my mum died in a car crash when I was 8, he'd been drowning himself in cheap whiskey. He saw my disability not as a tragedy, but as an inconvenience, another reason for his life to be a wreck. His disability checks were a source of beer money, and my existence was a constant, sober reminder of his failures. The gap between us wasn't just a room, it was a universe of resentment and unspoken grief. The front door slammed, rattling the cheap glasses on the kitchen counter. It was late, the air thick with the smell of rain and exhaust fumes from the street below. I heard Frank's heavy, stumbling footsteps and his slurred laughter. "Leo, got a surprise for your kid." His voice was a gravelly mess. I tensed, my fingers tightening on the worn armrests of my wheelchair. His surprises were never good. The door to my room creaked open, spilling the dim hallway light across my floor. Frank stood there, swaying, a wide, foolish grin on his face. Behind him, shoved forward into the room, was a girl. She looked like a ghost, small and wiry, with tangled black hair, hiding a pale, sharp-featured face. She was wearing a thin, floral dress that was too big for her, and scuffed combat boots. Her eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the room with an unnerving stillness. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to fight or flee. The air filled with the sour stench of whiskey from my father's breath. "Have fun. She's a gift for the night," Frank snickered, giving her a rough push that sent her stumbling forward. She caught herself on my desk, her hand landing inches from my laptop. "Dad, what the hell?" I stared, my voice barely a whisper. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "What gift? Who is this?" Frank just shook his head, his eyes glassy. "It's time you became a man, son. Time you learned a thing or two." He was so drunk he could barely stand, but his words were like stones, heavy and cruel. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up my neck. I hated this. I hated him for bringing his drunken, twisted ideas into my only sanctuary. I hated my own powerlessness, trapped in this chair, unable to even stand up to him. The girl said nothing. She just watched us, her expression unreadable, her silence more unnerving than any scream. I felt a desperate urge to reach for the walkers by my bed, just for the illusion of strength. I clenched my jaw, the muscles in my neck tight. My hands trembled with a rage I couldn't express. "Get her out of here, Dad. Now!" My voice was low, shaking. "I don't want this." Frank just waved a dismissive hand. "Already paid her. Said she knows all the tricks." He winked, a grotesque gesture that made my stomach turn. "Gonna go have a drink with Mike down the hall. We'll toast to my boy finally growing up." He laughed again, a hollow rattling sound, then turned and staggered out of the room. The door swung shut with a soft click, leaving me in the sudden deafening silence with the stranger. The only sound was the hum of my old computer and the distant wail of a siren cutting through the Detroit night. The girl hadn't moved. She stood like a statue, her gaze fixed on something beyond the walls, as if she were a million miles away. I took a shaky breath. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. She turned her head slowly, her dark eyes finally focusing on me. The look in them was sharp, intelligent, and held a chilling intensity that didn't match her fragile appearance. "I hear you," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. It held no fear, only a strange sort of purpose. "You can call me Maya." She took a step towards my bed, her movements silent and graceful, like a cat. I recoiled instinctively, pushing my wheelchair back until it hit the wall. "Listen," I stammered. "I'm sorry about my dad. He's drunk. I didn't ask for this. You don't have to be here. You can take the money and just go." She stopped, tilting her head. "He paid me to do what he wants," she said, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. A cold dread washed over me. This was wrong on so many levels. This girl, who couldn't be much older than 18, was in my room because of my father's disgusting drunken whim. "I don't want anything from you," I insisted, my voice gaining a bit of strength. I want to be left alone." I gestured vaguely at my legs at the wheelchair. "I've suffered enough. Can't people just leave me in peace?" A wave of self-pity, hot and familiar, washed over me. The years of pain, the doctors shrugging, the neighbours offering useless platitudes about God's plan. I didn't realise I was speaking my thoughts aloud until I saw her expression shift. The hard edges softened, replaced by something that looked almost like understanding. She moved with that same startling quickness, and before I could react she was beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. Her touch was unexpectedly warm. I flinched, not having been touched with any kindness by a stranger in years. Her other hand reached up, not to my face, but to a simple black ribbon she wore around her neck. A choker. She unclasped a small, circular gold charm from the ribbon. It glinted in the dim light from my desk lamp. She held it between her thumb and forefinger, her movements precise and deliberate. "What would you give?" she whispered, her voice a hypnotic hum. "What would you give to be healthy again?" I stared at her, confused and unnerved. "Are you mocking me?" I snapped, my fear turning to anger. "No," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "I'm making you an offer." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Unless you have a few $1,000,000 for some miracle cure in Switzerland, there's nothing you can offer me." She smiled that strange, secret smile again. "Money isn't the only currency. What if I asked you to give up everything you thought you knew, to believe in the impossible?" Before I could answer, she moved. It was a blur. She pressed the gold charm against the side of my neck. I felt a sharp, cold prick like a needle. I cried out, a strangled gasp, trying to shove her away, but my arms suddenly felt like lead. My vision swam. The edges of the room blurred into a dark tunnel. "What? What did you do?" I slurred, my tongue thick and useless. A creeping numbness spread from my neck, down through my chest and into my limbs. I was paralysed, but in a new terrifying way. My hand slipped from my wheelchair's armrests. Panic seized me. My drunk father had brought a killer into our home. This was it. This was how I was going to die. Through the haze, I saw her stand up. She looked down at me, her expression a mixture of pity and triumph. "Bronze stallion, new moon," she murmured, the words nonsensical. She blew a kiss from her fingertips, a ghostly, ironic gesture. Then she turned and walked out of my room, closing the door softly behind her. A moment later, I heard the faint click of the apartment's front door. Then nothing. The world dissolved into blackness. I woke to the harsh morning light slanting through my grimy window. My head throbbed, and my mouth was as dry as sand. For a moment I was disoriented, the events of the previous night feeling like a fever dream. The girl, Maya, the needle prick, the darkness. Then I became aware of something else, or rather, the lack of something, the familiar, deep, grinding ache in my spine. It was gone. The constant fire in my leg muscles was extinguished. Cautiously I tried to wiggle my toes. They moved, not with the usual sluggish, painful effort, but with a crisp, immediate response. I sat up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching the cold, dusty floorboards. I hadn't done that without agonizing effort in years. My breath hitched. Was this real? Or had my mind finally snapped? Driven by a desperate, wild hope, I pushed myself up. My hands braced against the mattress, my arms trembling, not from weakness, but from disuse. And then I was standing on my own 2 feet. No walkers, no wheelchair, no searing pain. I stood there, swaying slightly, a choked sob escaping my lips. I took a step, then another. My legs were unsteady, like a newborn foal's, but they held me. I walked across my small room, my hands outstretched for balance. I touched the faded concert posters on my wall, the dusty spines of my programming books. Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing. It was a miracle, a true, impossible miracle. In the middle of my silent, joyous celebration, the door opened. It was Frank, looking pale and hungover, a mug of coffee in his hand. He stopped dead, his eyes widening in disbelief. The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "Leo," he croaked. "I'm walking, Dad," I laughed, turning in a slow circle. "I'm walking!" He just stared, his mouth agape, as if seeing a ghost. For a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of the father I remembered from before Mom died, a man capable of wonder. But it was gone in an instant. The joy in my chest was so immense, so overwhelming, that I didn't feel the first tremor. It started in my hands, a faint vibration. Then my vision began to flicker at the edges. A cold wave washed over me, and the ghost of the old pain returned with a vengeance. I opened my mouth to say something, to tell him, but the words wouldn't come. I grabbed my throat, a sudden, violent spasm seizing my entire body. My legs buckled. I crashed sideways, my shoulder hitting the corner of my desk with a sickening thud before I crumpled to the floor. The world erupted in an agony I hadn't felt in years, 1,000 times worse than before. It was the price of that brief, beautiful freedom. "Leo! Son!" Frank rushed to my side, his hangover forgotten in a surge of raw panic. He tried to lift me, but I was a dead weight, my body convulsing in a brutal, full-body tremor. The pain was blinding. It felt like every nerve ending was on fire. I was trying to scream, but only ragged, choked gasps came out. He managed to drag me, his face a mask of terror, back to the bed and heave me onto it. The sheets were instantly soaked with my sweat. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. He didn't call 911. He called Sarah Thompson, my social worker. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman who visited once a week, mostly to document my father's neglect. Frank hated her, but in that moment of sheer terror, she was the only person he could think of who represented some kind of order in his chaotic world. Miss Thompson arrived within 20 minutes, her expression a familiar mask of weary professionalism. She took one look at me, writhing on the bed, and her eyes narrowed. "Frank, what happened? You said on the phone," she began, her tone sharp. Frank, now pacing nervously, blurted out a garbled, unbelievable story. "He was walking, Sarah. I swear to God, he was walking around the room, normal as you please. Then he just collapsed." She shot him a look of deep skepticism, the kind reserved for drunks and liars. "He was walking! Frank, have you been drinking this morning?" She approached my bed, her touch surprisingly gentle as she checked my pulse. I tried to speak, to tell her about the girl, Maya, about the needle, but my jaw was locked, and my muscles were in open rebellion. All I could do was lie there, trapped in my own failing body, listening to them talk about me like I wasn't even there. After Miss Thompson gave me a muscle relaxant from my emergency kit, and the worst of the spasms subsided, she left, promising to schedule a new specialist appointment, but clearly believing Frank had suffered a drunken hallucination. The apartment fell silent again. I lay in bed, the phantom sensation of walking still tingling in my legs. It hadn't been a dream. The memory of standing, of taking a step, was burned into my mind, and with it the memory of Maya. Her strange words echoed in my head. Bronze stallion, new moon. It sounded like gibberish, the ramblings of a madwoman. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a clue, a key to getting that feeling back? The stallion. There was a famous mural downtown on the side of an old factory. A massive, rearing horse made of welded scrap metal, shimmering like bronze in the sun. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. My body ached, but my mind was racing. I slowly, painfully, reached for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers, still stiff and clumsy, fumbled with the screen. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Cody. Cody and I had met in an online coding boot camp. He was brilliant, funny, and the only person who treated me like a mind instead of a broken body. We'd collaborated on projects, pulling all-nighters fueled by energy drinks, and a shared passion for elegant code. He was the closest thing I had to a real friend. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the call button. How could I explain this? A magic girl, a miracle cure, a cryptic clue. He'd think I'd lost my mind. But the alternative? Doing nothing, just accepting this new, deeper level of hell, was unthinkable. I took a deep breath and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Leo? Man, you sound like crap. Everything okay? I took another breath. Cody, I said, my voice hoarse. I need a huge favour, and you're going to think I'm crazy. I told him everything, the whole insane story, from Frank's gift to the brief, glorious moment I could walk, to the agonising crash and the cryptic clue. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, probably running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. I braced myself for the disbelief, the gentle suggestion that maybe I should talk to a doctor about my medication. So let me get this straight, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. A mysterious chick your deadbeat dad brought home stabbed you in the neck with a magic charm. You were cured, then you weren't, and now you think she left you a riddle to find her at a giant metal horse sculpture? Yeah, I whispered, shame washing over me. That about sums it up. Another pause, then a heavy sigh. Dude, if I didn't know you, I'd say your dad's whiskey finally seeped into your brain, but... He trailed off. But you're my friend. And you sound desperate. When's the new moon? I'd already checked. Tonight, I said. All right, Cody said, his voice firming with resolve. I'll be there in an hour. Don't move. Well, you know what I mean. An hour later, Cody was manoeuvring my wheelchair down the building's rickety ramp. He was a whirlwind of nervous energy, glancing at me with a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Seriously, man, on a scale of 1 to I'm the star of a weird sci-fi movie. How are you feeling? He asked as he secured the chair in the back of his beat-up hatchback. Like I had a winning lottery ticket, and then it burst into flames in my hand, I replied, settling into the passenger seat. The drive through the city was surreal. The familiar sights of Detroit, the crumbling brick facades, the vibrant splashes of graffiti, the distant gleam of the downtown skyscrapers, all looked different. They were part of a world I had briefly rejoined, a world that had been snatched away from me again. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the rattling of the car and the low thrum of the radio. This is nuts, you know that, right? Cody said, breaking the quiet. This girl could be dangerous. She injected you with something, Leo. For all we know, it could have been poison. I know, I said, but for 5 minutes, Cody, I was free. I'd risk anything to feel that again. We found the mural in a desolate industrial area near the river. The bronze stallion was even more impressive up close, a magnificent, powerful creature forged from the city's discarded bones. It reared up against a backdrop of decaying brick, a symbol of defiant beauty in a landscape of ruin. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows. The area was deserted, save for the whisper of the wind through broken factory windows. A new moon was rising, a barely visible sliver in the darkening sky. We waited. Cody paced back and forth, shoving his hands in his pockets. I've got a bad feeling about this, man. This feels like the start of a horror movie. I just watched the mural, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. What if she didn't come? What if it was all just a cruel joke? As the last of the light faded, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its engine a low, expensive purr. It was completely out of place here. The driver's side door opened and a figure stepped out. It was her, but it was also not her. The tangled hair was now a chic, sharp bob. The tattered dress was replaced by a tailored black coat, designer jeans and expensive-looking boots. She looked polished, wealthy and impossibly confident. The only thing that was the same were her eyes, which still held that unnerving, piercing intelligence. She walked towards us, her heels clicking softly on the broken pavement. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was a different person from the frightened homeless girl in my room. This was someone in complete control. "Hello, Leo," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering if you'd figure it out. I'm glad you came alone." Her eyes flickered to Cody, a flash of annoyance in them. "I'm not alone," I said, finding my voice. "This is my friend Cody, and we want answers. Who are you? What did you do to me?" Cody stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of my wheelchair. "Yeah, what he said. My friend here isn't your lab rat." Maya's lips curved into a wry smile. "Protective. I like that. You can relax, Cody. I'm not going to hurt him. In fact, I'm the only one who can help him." She looked back at me, her expression turning serious. "What I gave you was a single, temporary dose of an experimental regenerative compound. It was developed by my father, Dr. Alistair Finch." My mind reeled. A scientist's daughter? This whole thing was a charade? "Why?" I asked. "Why the act? The disguise?" "Your father is a desperate, cruel man," she said, her voice hardening. "He was looking for a victim. I needed to see what kind of person he was. But I found you instead. A happy accident." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I can give you the full treatment, Leo. A permanent cure. But it comes with a price." "I knew it," Cody muttered, pulling out his phone. "There's always a catch." He started typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Dr. Alistair Finch says here he was a brilliant geneticist, dropped off the map about 20 years ago after a lab accident. Very mysterious." He looked up at Maya, his eyes narrowed. "What kind of price are we talking about? And why should we trust you? You lied to us from the second you met." Maya ignored him, her focus entirely on me. "The world is a broken place, Leo, filled with people like your father. People who hurt the weak and get away with it. The price is that you help me fix it. When you're cured, you'll be stronger than you can imagine. We could do so much good. We could deliver real justice." Her words were seductive, preying on every frustration, every feeling of helplessness I had ever known. To have power, to be strong, to make a difference, it was everything I had ever dreamed of. I was torn. My rational mind screamed that this was a trap. She was manipulative, dangerous, but my body, which had tasted freedom, and now ached with its loss, was screaming something else. It was begging me to say yes. "Don't listen to her, Leo," Cody warned, his voice low. "This is crazy talk. Vigilante justice? She's recruiting you for some kind of weird cult." "It's not a cult. It's a cause," Maya countered smoothly. "Think about it, Leo. A new life. A purpose. All you have to do is say yes." She took a step closer, and for a moment, I could almost feel the phantom strength returning to my limbs. The memory of walking, of standing tall, was so powerful, it was intoxicating. I looked at Cody, at his worried face, and then at Maya, at her confident, challenging gaze. Desperation is a powerful drug. It makes you do things you never thought you would. It makes you believe in promises that are too good to be true. I made my choice. "I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash and hope in my mouth. Cody let out a frustrated sigh, but he didn't argue further. He knew that look in my eyes. He knew I couldn't be talked out of it. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Maya's face. "Excellent choice." The plan she laid out was as strange as everything else. We would travel to a private, secluded facility upstate, disguised as a high-end wellness retreat. Frank would be told that an anonymous benefactor from a charity I'd applied to had agreed to fund an experimental treatment. It was all meticulously planned, disturbingly efficient. 2 days later, a black SUV, the same kind Maya had driven, pulled up to my apartment building. A stern-looking woman in a sharp suit, Ms. Reed, handled my father with a flood of legal jargon and paperwork that left him dazed and compliant. He barely seemed to register that I was leaving, just grunted a goodbye before retreating to his beer. It hurt, but it also made leaving easier. The facility was a stunning piece of modern architecture, all glass and cedar, nestled deep in a forest by a lake. It looked more like a billionaire's hideaway than a medical clinic. There we met Dr. Alistair Finch. He was a tall, thin man with kind, tired eyes and a gentle demeanour that was completely at odds with my image of a reclusive mad scientist. He explained the procedure, the risks, the science behind the compound. It all sounded legitimate, revolutionary even. He seemed genuinely dedicated to helping me. Cody, who had insisted on coming along as my personal caregiver, remained sceptical. He stayed by my side constantly, a silent, watchful guardian. The treatment began the next day. It wasn't a single injection, but a series of them, administered over a week. With each one, I felt stronger. The pain vanished completely. I could walk, then jog, on a treadmill. My atrophied muscles began to rebuild at an astonishing rate. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. But with the returning strength came something else, something I hadn't expected. A short fuse, a simmering anger that lay just beneath the surface. It came out in small ways at first. I snapped at a nurse for being too slow with the blood draw. I got into a pointless, heated argument with Cody about a bug in a piece of code. It wasn't me. The old Leo was patient, resigned. This new person was restless, irritable, and quick to anger. One afternoon, Dr. Finch was taking a blood sample. He was having trouble finding a vein, and the needle pricked my arm uncomfortably. Instead of just gritting my teeth, a wave of pure rage washed over me. "Just get it done," I snarled, my voice so harsh that the old man flinched, his hand trembling. I saw the shock and hurt in his eyes and was immediately flooded with shame. I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I don't know what's wrong with me." He just gave me a sad, worried look and said nothing. A few nights later, Maya came to my room. She was dressed in dark, practical clothing. "I think you're ready," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Ready for what?" I asked, a sense of unease creeping over me. "A field test," she replied. She told me about a man in a nearby town, a man who ran an illegal dog-fighting ring from his secluded farm. He was cruel, untouchable by the local law he had in his pocket. "We're going to pay him a visit," she said. "We're going to set those animals free and teach him a lesson he'll never forget." The old me would have been horrified, would have insisted on calling the authorities, animal control, anyone. But the new me, the angry, restless me, felt a dark thrill. The thought of confronting such a person, of using my new strength to inflict a just punishment, it was intoxicating. Against my better judgment and without telling Cody, I agreed. We moved under the cover of darkness. The farm was even worse than she'd described. The air was filled with the stench of fear and the pathetic whimpers of wounded animals. We saw the man, a big, brutish figure, dragging a terrified, bleeding pit bull into a barn, and something inside me snapped. The simmering anger erupted into a full-blown inferno. I didn't wait for Maya's signal. I vaulted the fence, my movements fluid and powerful. The man turned, his face a mask of surprise, just as I crashed into him. We fought. He was strong, but I was faster, and I felt nothing. He landed a solid punch to my jaw, a blow that should have sent me reeling, but I barely registered it. There was no pain, only a cold, focused rage. I saw the fear in his eyes as he realized he was losing, and it fueled me. The fight ended with him on the ground, broken and unconscious. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my knuckles raw. I had won. I had delivered justice. But I felt no satisfaction, only a cold, terrifying emptiness. As Maya and her silent animal rescue team freed the dogs, I stumbled away, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and horror. I looked at my hands, the hands that had just beaten a man into unconsciousness without a second thought. They didn't feel like my own. The lack of pain was the most terrifying part. It was like my body's warning systems had been shut off. I could have been seriously injured, could have broken a bone, and I wouldn't have even known. When we got back to the facility, I felt sick. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a profound sense of wrongness. I had enjoyed it. That was the most horrible truth. For a few minutes, I had enjoyed the violence, the power. I had become the kind of person I'd always despised. I avoided Cody, unable to look him in the eye, but he found me later, sitting alone by the lake. "Where were you tonight, Leo?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. He already knew. He could see it on my face. I couldn't lie to him. I told him everything. About the dogfighter, the fight, the terrifying rage, the absence of pain. I expected him to yell, to call me a monster. Instead, he just looked sad. "This is what she wants, Leo," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "She's not curing you, she's turning you into a weapon. This compound, it's not just fixing your muscles, it's doing something to your brain." "I know," I shouted, jumping to my feet. "Don't you think I know that? But what am I supposed to do? Go back to the way I was?" "No!" he shot back, his own anger flaring. "You're supposed to be better than this. You need to tell Dr. Finch. Tell him about the side effects. This isn't right, man. You're losing yourself." Our argument was bitter and raw, filled with the fear and frustration that had been building for days. I accused him of being jealous of my new strength. He accused me of becoming a thug. We said things we didn't mean, and the rift between us grew wider. The final dose was scheduled for the next day. It was meant to make the changes permanent, to lock in the cure forever. I spent the night in a state of turmoil. Was Cody right? Was I trading my soul for a healthy body? But the thought of the pain returning, of being trapped in that chair again, was a physical terror. I was terrified of what I was becoming, but I was more terrified of going back. Meanwhile, in his lab, Dr. Finch was reviewing my latest blood work on his computer. He was humming to himself, pleased with the data. My cellular regeneration was exceeding all his projections. He was on the verge of a breakthrough that could change medicine. It was then that an encrypted email arrived from an unknown sender. His brow furrowed. He almost deleted it, but his curiosity got the better of him. The email contained a single password-protected data file and a short message. "You are being deceived. The price is too high." Dr. Finch, a man who had built his career on data and evidence, felt a chill run down his spine. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the file. It contained a second set of data logs from my tests, logs that had been hidden from him. They showed neural activity scans, hormone panels, and neurotransmitter levels that were wildly abnormal. They painted a horrifying picture. The compound wasn't just healing tissue, it was suppressing the brain's pain receptors and dramatically amplifying the amygdala's fear and aggression responses. It was creating a perfect soldier, a warrior who felt no pain and was prone to uncontrollable rage. The sender was a lab tech who had quit a week earlier, a young man whose conscience had finally won out. As the horrifying truth settled in, Finch realized who had been deceiving him. It could only be one person. He had to stop the final treatment. He rushed to the lab door, but it wouldn't open. The digital lock glowed red. Access denied. He was trapped. Through the reinforced glass, he saw her. Maya. She stood there, calm and resolute, holding a small remote. "I'm sorry, Father." Her voice came through the intercom, devoid of emotion. "But you can't be allowed to interfere. You're too sentimental. You don't see the potential." He slammed his fists against the glass, his voice raw with desperation. "Maya, you don't understand. You'll turn him into a monster." But she just shook her head and walked away. At that same moment she came to my room, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing a story about how Dr. Thorne, her father's partner and the facility's owner, had sabotaged her mother's cancer treatment years ago out of jealousy. She claimed he was here now to steal her father's research and eliminate us all, fueled by the compound, by her kiss, by a blinding protective rage. I believed every word. I followed her to the lower levels, ready to play the hero. We confronted Dr. Thorne, a kind-looking, older man. Before he could speak, I attacked him. I was a tempest of fury, ready to kill, when another door burst open. It was Cody, with Dr. Finch, right behind him. Cody had found Finch locked in the lab and, using his own hacking skills, had bypassed the security. The truth came crashing down. Maya's story was a lie. The only monster in the room was the one she was trying to create. The final dose would have made the psychological changes irreversible. Staring at my trembling hands, at the terrified old man on the floor, I made the only choice I could. I refused the final treatment. And then the ultimate twist happened. In the weeks that followed, the rage subsided, but the cure held. My body, for some 1 in a billion reason, had integrated the compound's healing properties without the devastating neural side effects. I was a statistical impossibility. I was cured. I was free. I was me again. Maya was placed in psychiatric care, a victim of her own grief and twisted ideals. I returned to Detroit with Cody, a man who was no longer just a friend, but a brother. I stood on my own 2 feet, looking at the bronze stallion under a clear sky, a free man. My body was healed, but my soul bore the scars of the choice I almost made. I had been given a second chance at life, and I would not waste it. Thank you for listening to my story. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are not with our bodies, but with the monsters we are tempted to become. If you were moved by this journey, please hit that like button, subscribe for more cinematic stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I have one question for you. If you were offered a perfect cure with a terrible moral price, what would you choose?